My name is Dan Finucane, and I'm currently a regent. I love folk music, blues music, and I love singing and playing with other people.
My name is Ian Peoples. I'm a Jesuit regent. I'm kind of a football fanatic. Most of my weekends are spent watching at least a few games. I'm probably one of the biggest Lionel Messi fans. Welcome back to MagisTalk, where we explore the question, where is God calling me today? I'm your host, Ian Peoples, and I'm joined by a couple brothers, but one of them is my co-host, Dan Finucane.
And in the middle, we are joined by Father Bill Snyders, who we are really excited to have with us today. Father Bill is a Jesuit priest and spent nearly 40 years here in Belize over the course of a couple different tours, a couple different missions, and has served in various ministries as a teacher at St. John's College High School, as a chaplain at Belize Central Prison, and as pastor at La Señora de la Asunción at Key Caulker. He's in the country for a couple months, and so we thought that we would take this time to sit down with Father Bill and ask him to reflect a little bit with us on his experiences here in Belize and his wisdom that he's gained over the years being here, being with the people of Belize. So Father Bill, thanks for being with us.
Yes.
And I think something that's kind of fun is that you and I share a connection. We're from the same city in the United States, St. Louis, and went to the same high school.
No, I didn't go to St. Louis U High.
No?
No, I'm not a high U
Were
High.
you a Desmet man?
No.
Wow.
The school no longer exists. Campion High School, Prairie du Chien, Wisconsin.
Seriously?
Seriously.
Learning something new right at the very beginning.
But his parish in St. Louis is right next to mine. You're Christ the King, I'm Our Lady of Lourdes. So we're not that far apart.
That's right. So we grew up in the same neighborhood.
Yeah.
Is there any competition between the parishes, the schools, or anything like that?
Maybe we had a soccer team.
Soccer.
Yeah.
Very nice. Very nice. Did you play any soccer, Bill?
Oh, yes.
Oh, wow.
You're not a St. Louisan if you don't play soccer.
That's more than I could say when I was growing up in Texas, but I played some soccer myself. But all right, there you go.
Well, learning something new. This is great. Wonderful.
Well, as we said at the introduction, that Bill is a Jesuit. He's been here for over 40 years. And Bill, how many years?
32 years.
32
actually.
years.
32.
And how many years have you been a Jesuit, Bill?
Well, entered in 54.
Wow.
So you do the statistics on that.
I'm just going to say decades.
Yeah, okay.
I'll just say decades.
Good while.
Yeah, I'm not very good at math. Well, Bill, when did you first experience the call to become a Jesuit? Can you tell us a little bit about that discernment? Especially since you didn't go to the Jesuit high school. You know?
Yeah, but I did go to a great Jesuit high school, Campion High School, named after Blessed Edmund St. Edmund Campion.
Of course.
Prairie du Chien, Wisconsin. Premier school. Excellent. Had half our faculty were Jesuit priests. The other half were Jesuit scholastics. Only 3 or 4 laymen teaching, mostly coaches. But that was a great experience. I loved it. I guess my influence by Jesuits. I didn't know many Benedictines. Very few. So I guess my association with Jesuits, then I went to St. Louis U after Campion High School. So I had a lot of exposure to Jesuits, and that's mostly what was part of my life, a major part of my life.
Did you enter after completing undergrad studies?
That's right, yeah. I finished at St. Louis U and then entered.
And what did you study there at St. Louis U?
General Studies.
All right.
There was Father Dick Ryan, made Dean of the art school, that developed a program that combined about half of the courses were from the College of Arts and Science, the other half were from the School of Business. So in the last 2 years, junior and senior year, they meshed. And I really liked it.
And got you ready for everything and anything.
I couldn't decide one way or the other what direction to go. That's kind of the story of my life.
So you ended up entering after college.
Yes.
And I'm assuming that, if you were in Belize for about 3 decades, so you had some other ministries before coming here.
Yes.
So maybe you could tell us a little bit about what you did before you got to Belize and then how you ended up here.
I was 15, my first 15 years as a priest was at the Smet Jesuit High School in St. Louis. Started the counseling program, but when the first graduation class became juniors, I became full-time college counselor and saw 10 graduation classes in their observance of higher education, getting them familiar with what it was. Those kids in those days, since it was the first graduating class, were hoping that high school would last forever. That was their mentality. And to disabuse them of that notion, that was a major task. Getting them to visit with college admissions people that would come in droves into our Jesuit school. So that's what I did, college counseling for those remaining years. And at the end of those years, since I was superior the last 6 years, I knew that I was going to get switched somewhere. Dave Fleming was provincial, and he says, well, it'll be one of 3 places, Bill. Rockhurst in Kansas City, White House down south of the Retreat House, south of St. Louis, or Belize. Well, I had never been to Belize. Of the other 2, I was quite familiar with. And then in about a month's time, he says, well, it's going to be Belize. And that was my first experience out of the country of the USA. Quite an amazing experience, too. The last thing that you mentioned in the introductions, Dan, was out at Nuestra Señora de la Asunción. And that was my first apostolic work, I would say. Within a month, I was out there. Father Hunter and Father Dick Hadel really got one man on that island, Mr. Gerald Badillo, to get into a minister training program before there was such a thing in Belize. Sister Lynn Fields later developed a training program for ministers of the word, and it's a great institution here in the country. But Badillo was the man that introduced me to Key Calker and what went on there, so I really relish that.
I'm sure you've seen the island change quite a bit over the years.
Oh my goodness, yes. There was no such thing as a golf cart, and now they're everywhere. There was no such thing as an alto sign, halt, stop sign. There was no such thing. And everybody walked, was in a lot better shape too. And it was primarily a fishing village. Very few tourists. Chocolate was about the only man who drove people out from Belize City out there, but almost a minuscule number of tourists in those days. That was in 1981, and my year of arrival. I came 3 months before independence, and saw the British flag taken down and the Belize flag raised up there at the Judicial House.
What was the feeling around that time? You were here to witness that, correct?
Oh, that was great time, because there was some rumblings, political rumblings about whether that should happen or not. And the heads of agreement, I wasn't here yet. Father Mo Murray, who preceded me by about 5 months, he was here. And there were some pretty rough times in Belize at that time. But by the time the actual handing over to Belize, the administration of Belize, they had come to accept it. And it was a wonderful experience, a great experience.
And speaking of your ministries in Belize and you talking about the development or changes that have taken place in Keokuk. I'm just wondering, with regards to the church here in Belize, what stands out to you about the church here, and how have you seen the church develop during the years of your service?
Well, Jesuit diminishment is a big thing. Even 4 years prior to my arrival at SJC, there must have been 7 full-time Jesuits on the faculty at the junior college and the high school. And then to my great surprise, when I arrived, I found out I was the only full-time Jesuit priest on the high school faculty. Father Charlie Hunter was teaching part-time, and there were several scholastics also on the faculty at that time. But then, as the years moved on, with Jesuit diminishment, the parishes went to the diocese, and there were a good number of diocesan priests in those days, and they took over from the Jesuits.
And the first, was it during your time here that we had the first non-Jesuit bishop named?
Oh yes,
Okay.
because Bishop Hodap was very much in place my early years here. I'd say all through the 80s. He started in the 70s, early 70s, I believe, and all through the 80s. I don't know when the beginning date for Bishop Martin was, O.P. Martin, but he was the first Belizean bishop. And from then on, Doric Wright and Larry Nicasio.
And you mentioned that, one of the big things is diminishment of Jesuits and their presence here. How have you seen lay leadership develop here in Belize?
Well, we have tremendous, great faculty, I think, really dedicated people. I feel as Jesuits, we didn't go through the preparatory work that is really needed to help them. They took on leadership, even almost immedately after I arrived. Jack Stoffel was headmaster, but then Stuart Simmons was, Dick Hadel was for just a short time, 6 months, 7 months, and then Stuart Simmons, the first Belizean headmaster. So things in the high school, it was kind of forced. I don't know that there was all that much preparation. There wasn't as much preparation on the part of the Jesuits of the teachers taking over the responsibilities of the school as I feel there really should be. It's only in retrospect that you realize that was not addressed very well. It just happened. All of a sudden it was there. Hardly any Jesuits in the high school, and then lay faculty had to take over the leadership.
So it sounds like, in that instance, maybe an area that we could learn from in hindsight, looking ahead, to make sure that the formation of people who work with us as Jesuits in our mission, whether it's at SJC, parishes, wherever it might be, that there's better preparation. And I think talking to some lay folks, as we as Jesuits are looking ahead to the future, there are a lot of lay folks that I think have had that formation since maybe.
We Jesuits have made amends very with a lot of effort and the amount of contact then of the lay faculty with our Jesuit institution, the way in which our high schools work together. They realize they're part of a much larger thing than just SJC. SJC is one high school of about 50 Jesuit high schools in the United States. So they really, and they cottoned to that. They really loved that. I think it broadened their vision, and they took to it like fish to water. They loved it. They entered into it beautifully.
And kind of looking at your experience, your 32 years here, what is one, maybe two graces that come to mind that you've received?
I didn't know there was a larger world before I left the U.S. And this Belize is an incredibly expansive world. Some cynics speak of the U.S. as being the biggest island in the world, and there's a lot of truth to that. This country is open to an enormous range of peoples in the Caribbean, and the background, the ethnic background, is extremely extensive here. I love that, and it was a revelation to me. It was I find that as a major grace, just seeing that we're in a much larger world in the United States. I think that's why a good number of our high schools want youngsters to come down here and experience what is now called a third world country, but you look at where we are now, it's not exclusively third world. There's parts of it, Toledo district, that's very much third world, and we've got to make a lot greater effort down there. But this country has really moved and stepped up to the challenges, is my impression.
And I love that you bring up how big the world is here as compared to the U.S. because it's so counterintuitive because the population is smaller, but within the population of Belize, and I think Dan and I have experienced this in our short time here, are, like you said, that myriad of cultures and ethnicities that are all they're all together in a pretty close space.
Condensed area.
They're close to one another. Yeah. And like you said, there are people from all over the world here, all over the Caribbean. So that's a good grace for me to think about because my world has gotten bigger since moving to Belize, even though maybe I haven't named that as a grace. So that's really helpful, Bill.
And people here are a lot closer to each other. They know each other. There's a cohesiveness here. Whereas in the extent of the U.S., they can sort of isolate themselves and become almost strangers to the rest of the world. I always speak of Belize City as the most lived-in city I've ever lived in. There's just a vibrancy and a culture that has Belizeans close to each other. I really love that.
And especially as we come out of pandemic more and more, I'm really looking forward to experiencing what you're talking about more because I feel like we've been a little sheltered, we've missed out on a few things.
Yeah. These last 3 years have really been tough, especially for high school kids.
Yes.
That's their most social dynamism is going on within them at those years, and they've missed out on that.
And speaking of challenges, Bill, what have challenges been during your years here in the country? Obviously, looking at Belize, its location, Central America, as compared to our neighboring countries. Well, the 80s were a really challenging, really horrible time in some of those places with wars, civil wars, internally armed conflicts, or challenges within the church. And what are your thoughts on how these have been met? You've kind of already alluded to Belize stepping up, but could you articulate some of those challenges?
My personal greatest challenge was getting myself acclimated to this culture. I'm not supposed to acclimate myself to it. I mean, I've got to acclimate myself to it. It's not supposed to change for my sake. So getting to know, especially Belizean youngsters, for the first 15 years here in the classroom, with 30, 35 Belizean youngsters in every section. You get to know a lot of students, and they're the ones that shape you and teach you. I have great regard for them. I've met the full range of Belizean students, I think.
Do you have any stories that stand out to you from working with students?
Just getting to know their families a little bit. Dick Hadel was a lot better at that than I was. I found myself so busy because it was not only the 4 sections of English language, I had a couple of fourth form classes in religion. I had the island key. I joined some organizations here in Belize, and I don't know, I just found my time very precious. I didn't have a whole lot of time. And I'd spend weekends correcting student essays. That third form course is their first writing course. So many times I'd be writing as much to them in regard to their essays as they wrote to me. And I'd consume a full weekend correcting essays. They had an essay per week. And that's a lot of kids. That's a lot of correction. You learn a lot.
That's hard work.
Oh, it's hard work. But good work. Good work. Because I love teaching, and I think I became pretty good at it. The number of kids I have known who have gone on to their further education and professional education, it just goes on and on and on. Just in the last 2 months, I've seen 8 or 10 of them and had kind of personal visits, catching up on their lives, because high school is just an entree into a much larger and much more difficult life than just high school life.
I think the amount of phone calls to the Jesuit residents in Belize increased about 1,000%
Oh,
after
come on.
Father Bill got here. People calling and scheduling meetings with him. So and we hear your name all the time out at the prison as well.
That's been my favorite apostolate.
Wow.
In 2004, I came back from a 6-year assignment to Discernment from 96 to 2002. Was in the classroom for another year. Got far more involved in retreats, especially Kairos retreats, but the individual class retreats. But getting into the prison, John Woods was an amazing individual. And for him to have that vision of bringing that entire prison atmosphere to being a remedial thing in their lives. This is just a step to going back into your real family life. That was just a joy to participate in. So from 2004 to 2018, that's 14 years with ARC, which you're familiar with, aren't you?
Oh, and this
You're
is the guy
familiar with,
yes.
And maybe you could tell our viewers a little bit about the ARC and specifically kind of what your role was there, because you had kind of a special particular role there that you've been able to kind of do again in your couple months here.
John Woods said, Father Snyders, if you could put a spiritual twist, I think of a lemon twist when I think of twist, put a spiritual twist on the 12 steps. That was, that's 14 years in development. Right now, I can almost do it blindfold. But at the beginning, when an entrance class was like 100 guys, can you imagine having 100 young, and most of them didn't have much of an education or background. So that was a particular challenge in the early days of ARC. Juan Vega did a great job. He was director. And then soon, I'd say within 3 years, they had the smaller entrance groups of 25 to 30 men at a time. That was much more digestible for the director. At the beginning, no, it was a tough go. So you learn by doing, and no substitute for experience, as you guys can verify.
Sure. And something that I've heard a lot of guys talk about who've been through the ARC or are currently there is your work with the fifth step, step 5, and the importance of sharing those if you want to call them, sometimes guys will refer to them as sins or mistakes that they've made, and being able to offer them the sacrament of confession. But more importantly, something that I know you do with the guys is to really explain what sin is and to give them a sense for what does it mean to have a God who's loving and merciful and rescues us from that. I don't know if you want to say a little bit more about that.
Well, we Jesuits, as soon as we get in, we do the spiritual exercises. And the first week of the spiritual exercise is on sin, the triple sin. El Diablo, our first parents who were totally duped. And then other individuals. And then you get to examining yourself too. I think that's an important, it helps them get perspective so they don't see themselves in their addiction as just victims. They have sin in their life too, and to be accepting it. But I start that off, it's called sin and redemption. Well, I give a strong push on redemption, what Christ has done. It's just incredible. The love of the Father in this. So I love teaching that to the guys, and when you have men in the group who have a little bit of an education and are able to ask good questions and enter into dialogue, all the better. I love that.
Thanks for sharing about that. And again, I think one of the great joys that I've had kind of walking in your footsteps, working at the ARC, is getting to hear the stories of men whose lives have been changed by having that opportunity to recognize their mistakes and then unburden themselves, either in the sacrament of confession or just by sitting down to talk with you. And I think that impact is continuing to be felt among the men.
A special joy, Dan, is when you're out and about. Let's say I take the water taxi out to the quay, or I'm at market or in a store or whatever. People will come up and say, I was with you there at ARC. And then I'd ask, what generation? Because I think we were through about 32 generations by that time in those 14 years. Wow. A generation every 3 months or so. So that's a special joy. And many times they're with family and they're a part of ongoing constructive population of Belize. Heads of families, and Francis Woods has any number of people who have been through ARC on his team of workmen there at Cisco Construction. That's a special joy to see those men back in society and working. What I hate to see are the men who have been consigned just to so many years there, and I say, my goodness, does a judge know what 1 year is, much less 15, 30? I just, oh gosh.
And I think when we hear your name spoken at the prison, it's from guys who have been there, who have been consigned there for decades, right? But the fact that they still remember you as someone who loved them, who cared about them, who brought joy into that place. And I remember one guy, he was so impressed with the fact that you ate the food that they ate, and then you took a nap on one of their beds because you had to take your midday siesta. So you get that little rest.
Well, they like that. I'm just one of the crew. That's right. And I love being accepted that way. Mm-hmm. I introduce myself as, how they do at class. I am Diego Jimenez. And then the class says, hi, Diego. And he says, recovering alcoholic or whatever. And I introduce myself as Bill Snyders, recovering addict. Well, we're at home together. Mm-hmm. So we get along really well. I've really relished that apostolate and have to thank the person who recommended my name to John Woods and being able to participate in that program.
And we recently had Cisco on last time.
Did you hear?
On one of our shows, to talk about his work that he does, and of course we mentioned his father.
It's too bad this wasn't going and you couldn't interview John Woods. That would have been something.
Yes. Father and son together. Well, Bill, as we're sort of nearing the end of our conversation and you're nearing the end of your visit here, I want to ask, what are your hopes for the church in Belize in the years to come? I know that's maybe a broad question, but you've recently come back and you've had such a joyful experience here. And as you prepare to leave this place again, what are your hopes for the church?
A phrase had come to my mind. You ever hear the word, with desolation is the world made desolate, because no one thinks in their heart? I think, it's not a brain thing, it's a heart thing. We're into the renovation of the church through the synodality mode of sharing. That comes from prayer and letting the Holy Spirit speak to your heart. I think, if all the citizenry, all the way from the top to the bottom, would be thinking with their heart, they'd change, and it would really become a more unified country. That comes to my mind in regard to your question.
That's a beautiful image to sit with as we end today, of thinking with the heart. And just a reminder, by the time that this is airing, the Lenten Synod videos that the Society of Jesus have put out will have ended. But if you want to go back on YouTube to learn more about the Synod, we welcome you to go back. And I believe it's Belize Jesuits is the name of the channel.
Yep, and we'll link that. We'll link that in the show, so you'll be able to have access to that playlist. Absolutely.
And as always, we end with a question. And today's question is actually kind of challenging. I want to credit Ian. He came up with a challenging question. Usually we ask, favorite book.
I thought you would ask me that question. No, there's another one?
I Googled Catholic icebreakers. And this one popped up, so I can't take credit for the question, but I want y'all to think about. So what is the question, Dan?
So the question is, if you could ask Jesus to change one problem in the world today, which problem would you pick? And Bill, we'll put you on the spot to answer it first, so that we have time to think of the answer.
The family is such a key educator. I know we have a huge investment in education. Jesuits are noted for that. But it's a concerted effort by all the parties in the formation, education of youth. Wherever the church is, the church teaches. So the teaching of Christ. What do you say at baptism? I baptize you in the name of the Father. Teaching them, Matthew's Gospel, the end of it, the mission statement. I baptize you in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, teaching them everything I have taught you. My God, what a challenge that is, huh? It's a lot more than just pouring water on a child's head saying, I baptize you in the name of the Father, teaching them everything I have taught you. Oh, wow. Where's the beginning and where's the end of that one? Thanks for having me.
Oh, it was wonderful to have you, Bill. As for my the problem, I think it'd be the problem of the sin of Cain. I think when taking the life of another human being, just changing the hearts of people, to make that such an impossible thing to do, and that's obviously on my mind here in Belize, working with young men and men who have had the lives of their friends taken, attempts on their lives, maybe they have taken another person's life, and just the damage that does, not only obviously to the person who's being killed, but the person who's committing that terrible act. That damages the soul, and then all the loved ones circling of the loved ones of the person who's been harmed and the one doing the harming. It's so
crimes of passion, and they're not aware of their passion.
Exactly.
They're not
So
managing them.
just to wake us up to the dignity of every life, that every person is really a world unto themselves, and when a person's life is snuffed out, that world ends, and there's just so many amazing young men and men that we work with at the prison who've experienced these sorts of things. And we know that death is a natural part of life, but for it to end in a destructive way, in the way that
And way too early.
Way too early. It's really such a tragedy. So,
Had you pondered that question too?
I have. So my answer actually, I think, dovetails really nicely with what the two of you said. Something I think about all the time for myself and just looking at the world is the problem of indifference. Indifference to the issues, whether it's murder in our city, whether it's the fact that maybe our neighbor or our neighbors really struggle, their families are hurting, and to turn away. I think of, in his famous letter from a Birmingham jail in 1963, Dr. Martin Luther King, he was writing to kind of speak out against racism. And it would have been easy for him to say the biggest problem is those who are actively promoting racist ideas. But he actually said it was about those who stand back and say nothing, those who are silent. And so a problem I would want to see Jesus solve, and I think Jesus is so emblematic of this, is how to be compassionate. How to be compassionate. Ian introduced me this morning to a phrase I really like, to do heart surgery. But not our physical heart so much as, what Ezekiel talks about, taking out our stony heart, replacing it with a flesh heart that feels, that can suffer with. And I think when we do that, it requires us to get close. But I think that it helps us step in when we need it, especially with people who are on the margins.
Well, guys, thank you so much. Bill, thank you so much for being with us today. And it's been a real gift to have you back in the community and to have worked alongside you a little bit at the prison as well. It's been a real gift for us. We want to thank you for tuning in with us today, whether that's on Guadalupe Media's television channel or on social media. If you are on social media, again, please leave a comment. Let us know what you would like us to talk about or people you'd like us to speak with. We're still waiting on those comments, and we look forward to being with you next time. And we hope you're having a great summer. This was recorded a little earlier, so wherever you're at right now, we hope you're having a good summer months and staying safe. Bye.